If you've been following the news lately, you might have noticed headlines growing louder every day. Stories like Trump reignites election fraud claims, secret war plans leaked in private chat, or US allies question trust after shocking revelations. It leaves many wondering, how did it get to this point? How did America's internal debates and global relationships unravel so quickly? The answer lies in a recent interview that's making waves across political circles. Appearing on Newsmax, Donald Trump once again sparked controversy, repeating old claims, making new accusations, and offering a glimpse into the chaotic landscape of American politics.
When I came here, I had to rely on others. And by the way, I had some great people. I got the largest tax cuts in history. I got the largest regulation cuts in history. I rebuilt our military.
From repeating allegations about the 2020 election being rigged, to downplaying a leaked military operation, to even praising Russia's negotiation tactics, each statement added another layer of concern. And, perhaps most striking of all, Trump's continued defense of those involved in the January 6th Capitol riot raises fresh questions about where his loyalties truly lie. In today's video, we're breaking down exactly what happened in that interview, what was said, what wasn't, and why it matters not just for the US, but for allies around the world watching closely. Let's dive into it and stay with us, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why this isn't just a story about one mistake, but a wake-up call about the fragile line between control and chaos in global politics. During his recent interview on Newsmax with Greg Kelly, Donald Trump once again returned to the familiar topic that has followed him since his defeat to Joe Biden. Calmly but firmly, he described the 2020 election as rigged and labeled that period in American history as an evil time. It's not the first time Trump has made such statements. In fact, this narrative has become a central theme in many of his public appearances, campaign rallies, and media interviews over the last few years. What makes this moment notable, however, is how the former president escalated the rhetoric. This time, he framed his survival and political comeback as a divine mission. He said, "Somebody said that God saved me in order to save this country." A powerful and emotional statement reflecting a belief that his role in politics is not just a personal ambition, but a calling tied to America's future. For many watching, this type of religious framing adds another layer to the conversation. It's not just about elections or political strategy, it becomes about faith, destiny, and the idea that America is at a crossroads only he can navigate. But where does this claim stand in the broader context of American politics? To understand the impact, let's look back at what's been documented. According to reports by AP News 2021, multiple lawsuits filed by Trump's legal team, spanning several battleground states, were reviewed and dismissed by courts, including the US Supreme Court. No widespread voter fraud was found that could have changed the outcome of the election. Investigations conducted by both state and federal officials reached the same conclusion. In fact, Trump's own appointed officials within the Department of Justice and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, declared the 2020 election the most secure in American history. Still, that hasn't stopped the former president from revisiting the topic, often linking it to broader narratives about government corruption, media bias, and what he describes as a rigged system. What's particularly striking in this interview is how Trump positioned the 2020 election not just as a political loss, but as a near catastrophe for the country. He warned, if this election wasn't won, this country had no chance. This country is going to be, remember I used to say for years, we're going to be Venezuela on steroids. And that's what was happening to the country. For viewers unfamiliar with that reference, Venezuela has often been cited in political debates as an example of economic collapse and authoritarian governance. By comparing the US to Venezuela, Trump signaled his belief that the stakes were, and still are, existential. From a psychological standpoint, these repeated references serve to reinforce a sense of urgency among his supporters. The narrative becomes not just about one election, but about the very survival of the nation as they know it. To put this into perspective, imagine a sports team that loses a championship game. Instead of accepting the loss, the team's captain insists the match was rigged and tells fans that unless he returns, the team will never win again. Over time, this creates a dedicated base of followers who no longer trust the referees, the league, or even the rules of the game. That's the emotional space this narrative operates in. However, it's essential to note, especially under YouTube's guidelines on misinformation, that no official investigation or court ruling has verified Trump's claims of widespread election fraud. In fact, as of today, the US electoral process for 2020 remains legally certified, with Joe Biden recognized as the duly elected president. Yet, the political power of this narrative persists. Trump's words about being saved by God align with themes he's used in major events, such as the Republican National Convention in July 2024. Reuters, 18 July 2024, reported similar remarks where Trump described his political journey as a mission and suggested divine intervention played a role in his survival after events like his criminal trials and political setbacks. For his base, this religious language resonates. Many see it as validation that their support is not just political, but moral and spiritual. Critics, however, argue that invoking God in this context risks deepening divisions, turning political disagreements into matters of faith. Regardless of where one stands, it's clear this narrative isn't going away. In fact, Trump's repeated references to the 2020 election, despite lacking legal backing, continue to shape voter sentiment heading into the next election cycle. This raises a broader question for democracy itself. What happens when faith in elections erodes, not because of proven fraud, but because of persistent belief? Looking back at American history, moments like this are rare but not unprecedented. Contested elections from the 1876 Hayes-Tilden race to the Bush-Gore battle in 2000 have always tested the nation's faith in its institutions. But what sets this era apart is the scale, the speed of information, fueled by social media, and the ability of one individual to keep a disputed narrative alive for years. The impact is already visible. According to a Pew Research Center study, 2023, a growing number of Americans express doubt about the integrity of elections, especially among Republican voters. This skepticism has influenced policies in several states, leading to changes in voting laws, tighter restrictions, and new debates about election security. For older voters, especially those between 45 and 65, this is deeply unsettling. Many grew up believing in the sanctity of the ballot box, an institution above politics. Now, watching that foundation questioned so openly raises serious concerns about the future. And there's another layer, international perception. Democracies around the world have long looked to the US as a model of electoral integrity. When a former president repeatedly casts doubt on his own country's process, it not only weakens domestic trust, it sends a message globally that even the strongest democracies can falter. In closing this segment, it's worth remembering that words have power, especially when spoken by a figure as influential as a former US president. Whether viewed as a political strategy, a personal belief, or a rallying cry, Trump's statements about the 2020 election will continue to shape the political landscape in the months ahead. The question now is not whether the 2020 election was fair. That debate has been settled in court. The real question is, how much longer will this narrative influence American politics? And at what cost to the country's unity and trust in its democratic system? And that's where we turn next. Because this election narrative is just the first chapter in a series of controversies shaking the foundations of US leadership. That's the challenge here. USMCA was meant to signal strength, modernization, and fairness in trade. If even the architect of the deal discredits it, what message does that send to allies and trading partners? Will future agreements be honored or will they be torn up depending on the political winds? From a domestic perspective, American workers, farmers, and manufacturers rely on stability in these agreements. Sudden changes or threats of changes can impact prices, job security, and international competitiveness. And so when the conversation around trade becomes muddled, the public deserves clarity. It's not enough to simply label deals as good or bad. Voters should know who wrote the deal, what it does, and why it matters. And in this case, USMCA is Trump's deal. It carries his signature, his negotiations, and his promises to the American people. Ultimately, this moment in the interview raises a larger question about accountability. When leaders praise a policy one year and attack it the next, how should voters interpret that shift? Is it genuine concern or political convenience? Because in global trade, consistency matters. It builds trust with allies, reassures businesses, and strengthens America's hand in future negotiations. Mixed messages, however, risk doing the opposite, creating doubt, weakening alliances, and leaving citizens unsure about what's really going on behind the scenes. And with that, the conversation in the interview took a sharp turn, moving from trade to something even more serious. National security leaks, classified war plans, and a group chat that sent shockwaves through Washington. During the conversation, Greg Kelly brought up the allegations that sensitive details about a planned US military operation targeting Houthi forces in Yemen had been accidentally exposed in something as informal as a signal group chat. The chat reportedly included not just national security officials, but also, by mistake, a journalist, Jeffrey Goldberg, editor-in-chief of The Atlantic. Faced with the question, Trump appeared dismissive. He claimed the situation was blown out of proportion and suggested that the leak was nothing more than a technical error made by a junior staffer. Specifically, Trump pointed the finger at someone working under Congressman Mike Waltz, downplaying the significance of the breach and insisting that no classified information was shared. In his own words, Trump described it like this: some guy on the call at a lower level somehow connected Goldberg, but as far as I know, there was nothing classified. No big deal. The operation was a tremendous success anyway. Now, on the surface, this explanation might sound reasonable. Mistakes happen, especially in the fast-moving world of digital communication. But the facts, as reported by reputable outlets, tell a different story. On March 24th, 2025, The Atlantic published a detailed account confirming that Jeffrey Goldberg was indeed accidentally added to that Signal group chat. But what made this incident truly alarming wasn't just the accidental invite. It was the content shared in that chat, active discussions about US war plans, tactical assessments, and even references to intelligence assets deployed in the Middle East. To make matters worse, the Washington Post later reported that the Department of Defense had officially acknowledged the leak. They confirmed the authenticity of the screenshots provided by The Atlantic and admitted that sensitive operational details were indeed discussed in the thread. This public confirmation from the Pentagon contradicted Trump's claim that no classified information was leaked. It also raised immediate concerns about the security protocols, or lack thereof, surrounding national defense communications. For viewers trying to visualize just how serious this is, imagine a group of generals, military planners, and intelligence officers casually discussing battle plans over a WhatsApp chat, only to realize halfway through that a reporter has been listening the entire time. That's the level of exposure we're talking about here. And beyond the technical error, what stunned many observers was the tone inside the chat. According to sources, participants used emojis, fist bumps, fire symbols, symbols and American flags while discussing a military operation that involved life or death decisions. For critics, this behavior signaled a disturbing lack of seriousness when handling matters of national security. What this incident truly exposed was a deeper structural problem: how informal communication channels designed for convenience are now being used for conversations that belong in secured, highly classified environments. National security experts quickly pointed out that Signal, while encrypted, is not a replacement for official secure lines of communication. Encryption can protect the content, but it cannot prevent human error like adding the wrong participant, and once information is exposed, there's no way to pull it back. To put this into perspective, imagine leaving a vault full of military secrets unlocked, then realizing hours later that the media had walked through it. That's the scale of this breach. What also made this situation politically explosive was Trump's denial, especially after his administration spent years criticizing others for much less. Many couldn't help but draw parallels to the Hillary Clinton email controversy, where the use of a private server was treated as a major scandal, with calls for prosecution. Yet here, Trump was dismissing the accidental exposure of live military operations as no big deal, despite the Pentagon's own confirmation. That double standard didn't go unnoticed. Analysts also raised another chilling question. What if foreign intelligence agencies were monitoring the chat, especially since reports confirmed that Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy to Russia, was part of that signal thread while in Moscow? This created the very real possibility that hostile actors might have gained access to sensitive US military plans. Susan Rice, the former national security advisor, later commented on this exact scenario. She explained that the proper protocol for any US official communicating from abroad, especially from Russia, is to use secure facilities like the embassy's classified communication rooms. Instead, this entire conversation unfolded in a casual chat app wide open to interception. For global audiences, this incident painted a troubling picture, one where the most powerful military in the world could potentially expose itself through something as simple as a group chat error. In the end, Trump's attempt to shift blame onto a junior staffer did little to ease these concerns. If anything, it underscored the fragility of current communication systems and raised serious doubts about accountability at the highest levels of government. Because when war plans can accidentally land in a reporter's inbox, the question isn't just who made the mistake, but whether the system itself is broken. And that leads us to the broader conversation. How should leaders respond when sensitive information is mishandled? Should there be consequences? Or will political power once again shield those at the top from accountability? As the interview continued, what stood out wasn't just Trump's words, but his silences. When asked about Russia and the war in Ukraine, Trump avoided criticizing Vladimir Putin. Instead, he compared Russia's actions to his own negotiation style, saying, "Maybe Russia is dragging its feet because they're smart negotiators. I've done it. You stay in the game until you get the best deal." This comment came as reports confirmed Ukraine had agreed to an unconditional ceasefire, Reuters 2025, while Russia continued its offensive. Yet Trump chose to frame Russia's delay as smart strategy, raising familiar concerns about his reluctance to challenge Moscow. The conversation then shifted to January 6th. Trump praised Ashley Babbitt, the rioter shot while breaching a secure area, calling her a patriot and suggesting he'd support a lawsuit against the officer who fired the shot. He even floated the idea of a compensation fund for January 6th participants, describing them as patriots treated unfairly. For many, this moment connected two major controversies: Trump's refusal to criticize Russia and his continued defense of the Capitol rioters, leaving viewers questioning the message such statements send about loyalty and accountability. The controversy surrounding the leaked Yemen war plans didn't stop there. It deepened when Susan Rice, former US National Security Advisor, issued a serious warning about potential security breaches. In an interview with CNN 2025, Rice explained if Trump's special envoy to Russia, Steve Witkoff, was in Moscow while participating in the Signal group chat discussing military plans, there's a high chance Russia now has access to all that information. According to Rice, using a messaging app like Signal for sensitive military discussions instead of secure government channels violates standard national security protocols. One simple mistake can expose everything, troop movements and intelligence sources to operational strategies directly to foreign adversaries, she added. Her statement raised even more public concern. Is the US information security system facing deeper vulnerabilities than anyone imagined? At the end of this interview, what remains clear is the growing gap between words and actions, between political narratives and the facts on the ground. From repeating claims of a stolen election, avoiding criticism of Russia, to defending January 6th rioters, Trump's statements continue to spark controversy and raise tough questions. What happens when national security, alliances, and democratic principles are treated as talking points rather than responsibilities? And how will these moments shape America's image, both at home and abroad? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more updates on global politics and major events shaping our world.